Section 1 of The Gutting of Couffignal. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Winston Tharp. The Gutting of Couffignal, Section 1. 1. Wedge-shaped Couffignal is not a large island, and not far from the mainland, to which it is linked by a wooden bridge. Its western shore is a high, straight cliff that jumps abruptly up out of San Pablo Bay. From the top of this cliff, the island slopes eastward down to a smooth pebble beach that runs into the water again, where there appears a clubhouse and moored pleasure boats. Couffignal's main street, paralleling the beach, has the usual bank, hotel, moving picture theater, and stores, but it differs from most main streets of its size in that it is more carefully arranged and preserved. There are trees and hedges and strips of lawn on it, and no glaring signs. The buildings seem to belong beside one another, as if they had been designed by the same architect. And in the stores you will find goods of a quality to match the best city stores. The intersecting streets, running between rows of neat cottages near the foot of the slope, become winding hedged roads as they climb toward the cliff. The higher these roads get, the farther apart and larger are the houses they lead to. The occupants of these higher houses are the owners and rulers of the island. Most of them are well-fed old gentlemen who, the profits they took from the world with both hands in their younger days, now stowed away at safe percentages, have bought into the island colony so they may spend what is left of their lives nursing their livers and improving their golf among their kind. They admit to the island only as many storekeepers, working people, and similar riffraff as are needed to keep them comfortably served. That is Couffignal. It was some time after midnight. I was sitting in a second-story room in Couffignal's largest house, surrounded by wedding presents, whose value would add up to something between $50,000 and $100,000. Of all the work that comes to a private detective, except divorce work, which the Continental Detective Agency doesn't handle, I like weddings as little as any. Usually I manage to avoid them, but this time I hadn't been able to. Dick Foley, who had been slated for the job, had been handed a black eye by an unfriendly pickpocket the day before. That let Dick out and me in. I had come up to Couffignal, a 2-hour ride from San Francisco by ferry and auto stage, that morning, and would return the next. This had been neither better nor worse than the usual wedding detail. The ceremony had been performed in a little stone church down the hill. Then the house had begun to fill with reception guests. They had kept it filled, overflowing, until some time after the bride and groom had sneaked off to their eastern train. The world had been well represented. There had been an admiral and an earl or two from England, an ex-president of a South American country, a Danish baron, a tall young Russian princess, surrounded by lesser titles, including a fat, bald, jovial, and black-bearded Russian general who had talked to me for a solid hour about prize fights, in which he had a lot of interest, but not so much knowledge as was possible. An ambassador from one of the Central European countries, a justice of the Supreme Court, and a mob of people whose prominence and near prominence didn't carry labels. In theory, a detective guarding wedding presents is supposed to make himself indistinguishable from the other guests. In practice, it never works out that way. He has to spend most of his time within sight of the booty, so he's easily spotted. Besides that, 8 or 10 people I recognized among the guests were clients or former clients of the agency, and so knew me. However, being known doesn't make so much difference as you might think, and everything had gone off smoothly. A couple of the groom's friends, warmed by wine and the necessity of maintaining their reputations as cut-ups, had tried to smuggle some of the gifts out of the room where they were displayed and hide them in the piano. But I had been expecting that familiar trick and blocked it before it had gone far enough to embarrass anybody. Shortly after dark, a wind smelling of rain began to pile storm clouds up over the bay. Those guests who lived at a distance, especially those who had water to cross, hurried off for their homes. Those who lived on the island stayed until the first raindrops began to patter down. Then they left. The Hendrickson house quieted down. Musicians and extra servants left. The weary house servants began to disappear in the direction of their bedrooms. I found some sandwiches, a couple of books, and a comfortable armchair, and took them up to the room where the presents were now hidden under gray-white sheeting. Keith Hendrickson, the bride's grandfather, she was an orphan, put his head in the door. "Have you everything you need for your comfort?" he asked. "Yes, thanks." He said good night and went off to bed, a tall old man, slim as a boy. The wind and the rain were hard at it when I went downstairs to give the lower windows and doors the up and down. Everything on the first floor was tight and secure, everything in the cellar. I went upstairs again. Pulling my chair over by a floor lamp, I put sandwiches, books, ashtray, gun, and flashlight on a small table beside it. Then I switched off the other lights, set fire to a Fatima, sat down, wriggled my spine comfortably into the chair's padding, picked up one of the books, and prepared to make a night of it. The book was called The Lord of the Sea, and had to do with a strong, tough, and violent fellow named Hogarth, whose modest plan was to hold the world in one hand. There were plots and counterplots, kidnappings, murders, prison breakings, forgeries and burglaries, diamonds large as hats, and floating forts larger than Couffignal. It sounds dizzy here, but in the book it was as real as a dime. Hogarth was still going strong when the lights went out. 2. In the dark, I got rid of the glowing end of my cigarette by grinding it in one of the sandwiches. Putting the book down, I picked up gun and flashlight and moved away from the chair. Listening for noises was no good. The storm was making hundreds of them. What I needed to know was why the lights had gone off. All the other lights in the house had been turned off some time ago, so the darkness of the hall told me nothing. I waited. My job was to watch the presents. Nobody had touched them yet. There was nothing to get excited about. Minutes went by, perhaps 10 of them. The floor swayed under my feet. The windows rattled with a violence beyond the strength of the storm. The dull boom of a heavy explosion blotted out the sounds of wind and falling water. The blast was not close at hand, but not far enough away to be off the island. Crossing to the window, peering through the wet glass, I could see nothing. I should have seen a few misty lights far down the hill. Not being able to see them settled one point. The lights had gone out all over Couffignal, not only in the Hendrickson house. That was better. The storm could have put the lighting system out of whack, could have been responsible for the explosion. Maybe. Staring through the black window, I had an impression of great excitement down the hill, of movement in the night. But all was too far away for me to have seen or heard, even had there been lights, and all too vague to say what was moving. The impression was strong, but worthless. It didn't lead anywhere. I told myself I was getting feeble-minded and turned away from the window. Another blast spun me back to it. This explosion sounded nearer than the first, maybe because it was stronger. Peering through the glass again, I still saw nothing, and still had the impression of things that were big moving down there. Bare feet pattered in the hall. A voice was anxiously calling my name. Turning from the window again, I pocketed my gun and snapped on the flashlight. Keith Hendrickson, in pajamas and bathrobe, looking thinner and older than anybody could be, came into the room. "Is it?" "I don't think it's an earthquake," I said, "since that is the first calamity your Californian thinks of. The lights went off a little while ago. There have been a couple of explosions down the hill since I stopped. 3 shots, close together, had sounded. Rifle shots, but of the sort that only the heaviest of rifles could make. Then sharp and small in the storm came the report of a faraway pistol. "What is it?" Hendrickson demanded. "Shooting." More feet were pattering the halls, some bare, some shod. Excited voices whispered questions and exclamations. The butler, a solemn, solid block of a man, partly dressed and carrying a lighted 5-pronged candlestick, came in. "Very good, Brophy. Hendrickson said as the butler put the candlestick on the table beside my sandwiches. "Will you try to learn what is the matter?" "I have tried, sir. Telephone seems to be out of order, sir. Shall I send Oliver down to the village?" "No, I don't suppose it's that serious." "Do you think it is anything serious?" he asked me. I said I didn't think so, but I was paying more attention to the outside than him. I had heard a thin screaming that could have come from a distant woman, and a volley of small arms shots. The racket of the storm muffled these shots, but when the heavier firing that we had heard before broke out again, it was clear enough. To have opened the window would have been to let in gallons of water without helping us to hear much clearer. I stood with an ear tilted to the pane, trying to arrive at some idea of what was happening outside. Another sound took my attention from the window, the ringing of the doorbell. It rang loudly and persistently. Hendrickson looked at me. I nodded. "See who it is, Brophy," he said. The butler went solemnly away and came back even more solemnly. "Princess Chukovsky," he announced. She came running into the room, the tall Russian girl I had seen at the reception. Her eyes were wide and dark with excitement. Her face was very white and wet. Water ran in streams down her blue waterproof cape, the hood of which covered her dark hair. "Oh, Mr. Hendrickson!" She had caught one of his hands in both of hers. Her voice, with nothing foreign in its accents, was the voice of one who is excited over a delightful surprise. "The bank is being robbed, and the what do you call him, marshal of police has been killed." "What's that?" the old man exclaimed, jumping awkwardly because water from her cape had dripped down on one of his bare feet. "Wigan killed? And the bank robbed?" "Yes, isn't it terrible?" She said it as if she were saying wonderful. "When the first explosion woke us, the general sent Ignaty down to find out what was the matter, and he got down there just in time to see the bank blown up. Listen." We listened and heard a wild outbreak of mixed gunfire. "He'll enjoy himself most wonderfully. As soon as Ignaty returned with the news, the general armed every male in the household from Alexander Sergeyevich to Ivan the cook, and led them out happier than he's been since he took his division to East Prussia in 1914. "And the Duchess?" Hendrickson asked. "He left her at home with me, of course, and I furtively crept out and away from her while she was trying for the first time in her life to put water in a samovar. This is not the night for one to stay at home." Hendrickson said, his mind obviously not on her words. "And the bank?" He looked at me. I said nothing. The racket of another volley came to us. "Could you do anything down there?" he asked. "Maybe, but—" I nodded at the presents under their covers. "Oh, those," the old man said. "I'm as much interested in the bank as in them. And besides, we will be here." All right. I was willing enough to carry my curiosity down the hill. "I'll go down. You'd better have the butlers stay in here and plant the chauffeur inside the front door. Better give them guns if you have any. Is there a raincoat I can borrow? I brought only a light overcoat with me." Brophy found a yellow slicker that fit me. I put it on, stowed gun and flashlight conveniently under it, and found my hat while Brophy was getting and loading an automatic pistol for himself and a rifle for Oliver, the mulatto chauffeur. Hendrickson and the princess followed me downstairs. At the door I found she wasn't exactly following me. She was going with me. "But, Sonia," the old man protested. "I'm not going to be foolish, though I'd like to," she promised him. "But I'm going back to my Irina Androvna, who will perhaps have the samovar watered by now." "That's a sensible girl," Hendrickson said, and led us out into the rain and the wind. It wasn't weather to walk in. In silence we turned downhill between two rows of hedging, with the storm driving at our backs. At the first break in the hedge I stopped, nodding toward the black blot a housemaid. "That is your—" Her laugh caught me short. She caught my arm and began to urge me down the road again. "I only told Mr. Hendrickson that so he would not worry," she explained. "You do not think I am not going down to see the sights." 3. She was tall. I am short and thick. I had to look up to see her face. to see as much of it as the rain-gray night would let me see. "You'll be soaked to the hide running around in this rain," I objected.
"What of that? I'm dressed for it."
She raised a foot to show me a heavy waterproof boot and a woolen stockinged leg. "There's no telling what we'll run into down there, and I've got work to do," I insisted. "I can't be looking out for you."
"I can look out for myself."
She pushed her cape aside to show me a square automatic pistol in one hand. "You'll be in my way."
"I will not," she retorted. "You'll probably find I can help you. I'm as strong as you and quicker, and I can shoot."
The reports of scattered shooting had punctuated our argument, but now the sound of heavier firing silenced the dozen objections to her company that I could still think of. After all, I could slip away from her in the dark if she became too much of a nuisance. "Have it your own way," I growled, "but don't expect anything from me."
"You're so kind,"
she murmured as we got under way again, hurrying now, with the wind at our back speeding us along. Occasionally dark figures moved on the road ahead of us, but too far away to be recognizable. Presently a man passed us, running uphill, a tall man whose nightshirt hung out of his trousers, down below his coat, identifying him as a resident. "They finished the bank and are at Medcraft's," he yelled as he went by.
"Medcraft is the jeweler," the girl informed me.
The sloping under our feet grew less sharp. The houses, dark but with faces vaguely visible here and there at the windows, came closer together. Below, the flash of a gun could be seen now and then, orange streaks in the rain. Our road put us into the lower end of the main street, just as a staccato rat-a-tat broke out. I pushed the girl into the nearest doorway and jumped in after her. Bullets ripped through walls with the sound of hail tapping on leaves. That was the thing I had taken for an exceptionally heavy rifle. A machine gun. The girl had fallen back in a corner, all tangled up with something. I helped her up. That something was a boy of 17 or so, with one leg and a crutch.
"It's the boy who delivers papers," Princess Chukufsky said. "And you've hurt him with your clumsiness."
The boy shook his head, grinning as he got up.
"No, I ain't hurt none, but you kind of scared me, jumping on me like that."
She had to stop and explain that she hadn't jumped on him, that she had been pushed into him by me, and that she was sorry, and so was I. "What's happening?" I asked the newsboy when I could get a word in.
"Everything," he boasted,
as if some of the credit were his.
"There must be 100 of them, and they blowed the bank wide open, and now some of them is in Medcraft's, and I guess they'll blow that up, too. And they killed Tom Wiegand. They got a machine gun on a car in the middle of the street. That's it shooting now."
"Where's everybody? All the merry villagers?"
"Most of them are up behind the hall. They can't do nothing, though, 'cause the machine gun won't let 'em near enough to see what they're shooting at. And that smart Bill Vincent told me to clear out, 'cause I've only got one leg, as if I couldn't shoot as good as the next one if I only had something to shoot with."
"That wasn't right of them," I sympathized. "But you can do something for me. You can stick here and keep your eye on this end of the street so I'll know if they leave in this direction."
"You're not just saying that so I'll stay here out of the way, are you?"
"No," I lied. "I need somebody to watch. I was going to leave the princess here, but you'll do better."
"Yes,"
she backed me up, catching the idea.
"This gentleman is a detective, and if you do what he asks, you'll be helping more than if you were up there with the others."
The machine gun was still firing, but not in our direction now. "I'm going across the street," I told the girl. "If you—"
"Aren't you going to join the others?"
"No. If I can get around behind the bandits while they're busy with the others, maybe I can turn a trick." "Watch sharp now," I ordered the boy, and the princess and I made a dash for the opposite sidewalk. We reached it without drawing lead, sidled along a building for a few yards, and turned into an alley. From the alley's other end came the smell and wash and the dull blackness of the bay. While we moved down this alley, I composed a scheme by which I hoped to get rid of my companion, sending her off on a safe wild goose chase, but I didn't get a chance to try it out. The big figure of a man loomed ahead of us. Stepping in front of the girl, I went on toward him. Under my slicker, I held my gun on the middle of him. He stood still. He was larger than he had looked at first, a big, slope-shouldered, barrel-bodied husky. His hands were empty. I spotted the flashlight on his face for a split second. A flat-cheeked, thick-featured face with high cheekbones and a lot of ruggedness in it.
"Ignati!"
the girl exclaimed over my shoulder. He began to talk what I suppose was Russian to the girl. She laughed and replied. He shook his big head stubbornly, insisting on something. She stamped her foot and spoke sharply. He shook his head again and addressed me. "General Pleshkiv, he tell me bring Princess Sonia to home." His English was almost as hard to understand as his Russian. His tone puzzled me. It was as if he was explaining some absolutely necessary thing that he didn't want to be blamed for, but that nevertheless he was going to do. While the girl was speaking to him again, I guessed the answer. This big Ignati had been sent out by the general to bring the girl home, and he was going to obey his orders if he had to carry her. He was trying to avoid trouble with me by explaining the situation. "Take her," I said, stepping aside. The girl scowled at me, laughed. "Very well, Ignati," she said in English. "I shall go home." And she turned on her heel and went back up the alley, the big man close behind her. Glad to be alone, I wasted no time in moving in the opposite direction until the pebbles of the beach were under my feet. The pebbles ground harshly under my heels. I moved back to more silent ground and began to work my way as swiftly as I could up the shore toward the center of action. The machine gun barked on. Smaller guns snapped. 3 concussions close together. Bombs, hand grenades, my ears and my memory told me. The stormy sky glared pink over a roof ahead of me and to the left. The boom of a blast beat my eardrums. Fragments I couldn't see fell around me. That, I thought, would be the jeweler's safe blowing apart. I crept on up the shoreline. The machine gun went silent. Lighter guns snapped, snapped, snapped. Another grenade went off. A man's voice shrieked pure terror. Risking the crunch of pebbles, I turned down to the water's edge again. I had seen no dark shape on the water that could have been a boat. There had been boats moored along this beach in the afternoon. With my feet in the water of the bay, I still saw no boat. The storm could have scattered them, but I didn't think it had. The island's western height shielded this shore. The wind was strong here, but not violent. My feet sometimes on the edge of the pebbles, sometimes in the water. I went up the shoreline. Now I saw a boat, a gently bobbing black shape ahead. No light was on it. Nothing I could see moved on it. It was the only boat on that shore. That made it important. Foot by foot I approached. A shadow moved between me and the dark rear of a building. I froze. The shadow, man-size, moved again in the direction from which I was coming. Waiting, I didn't know how nearly invisible or how plain I might be against my background. I couldn't risk giving myself away by trying to improve my position. 20 feet from me, the shadow suddenly stopped. I was seen. My gun was on the shadow. "Come on," I cried softly. "Keep coming. Let's see who you are." The shadow hesitated, left the shelter of the building, grew nearer. I couldn't risk the flashlight. I made out dimly a handsome face, boyishly reckless, one cheek dark-stained. "Oh, how do you do?" the face's owner said in a musical baritone voice. "You were at the reception this afternoon." "Yes." "Have you seen Princess Chukovsky? You know her?" "She went home with Ignati 10 minutes or so ago." "Excellent." He wiped his stained cheek with a stained handkerchief and turned to look at the boat. "That's Hendrickson's boat," he whispered. "They've got it, and they've cast the others off." "That would mean they're going to leave by water." "Yes," he agreed. "Unless, shall we have a try at it?" "You mean jump it?" "Why not?" he asked. "There can't be many aboard. God knows there are enough of them ashore. You're armed. I've a pistol." "We'll size it up first," I decided, "so we'll know what we're jumping." "That is wisdom," he said, and led the way toward the shelter of the buildings. Hugging the rear walls of the buildings, we stole toward the boat. The boat grew clearer in the night, a craft perhaps 45 feet long, its stern to the shore, rising and falling beside a small pier. Across the stern something protruded, something I couldn't quite make out. Leather soles scuffled now and then on the wooden deck. Presently a dark head and shoulders showed over the puzzling thing in the stern. The Russian lad's eyes were better than mine. "Masked," he breathed into my ear. "Something like a stocking over his head and face." The masked man was motionless where he stood. We were motionless where we stood. "Could you hit him from here?" the lad asked. Maybe, but night and rain aren't a good combination for sharpshooting. Our best bet is to sneak as close as we can and start shooting when he spots us."
"That is wisdom," he agreed.
Discovery came with our first step forward. The man in the boat grunted. The lad at my side jumped forward. I recognized the thing in the boat's stern just in time to throw a leg out and trip the young Russian. He tumbled down, all sprawled out on the pebbles. I dropped behind him. The machine gun in the boat's stern poured metal over our heads. End of section 1.